Welcome to Outside Sales Talk, where we meet with industry experts to learn the strategies and tactics that make them successful. I'm your host, Steve Benson, and I've helped thousands of salespeople all over the world crush their quota. Today, I'll help you crush yours. All right. Well, today we're going to talk about how to accelerate your sales processes with responsiveness. We've got Andy Paul here. Today's guest, Andy Paul. Andy knows a ton about what it takes for companies and sales teams to power their growth. He offers insights as a proven sales leader and speaker and consultant and award-winning author of Amp Up Your Sales, Powerful Strategies that Move Customers to Make Fast, Favorable Decisions, and also Zero Time Selling, which I'm sure you've heard of, the 10 essential steps to accelerate every company's sales. So Andy, really excited to have you here today.
Well, Steve, thanks for inviting me. I'm honored to be here.
Absolutely. So Andy, as you know, we talk about field sales and field sales processes here. And my goal is to map kind of your areas of expertise and the things that you know to field salespeople. So I guess let's start out with one area that you're known to be an expert in. Walk me through a hypothetical close and show the world what your methodologies are for a field salesperson's right from the horse's mouth here, so to speak.
Yeah, well, sure. So how do I say this nicely? I think that the idea of a close or a closer is really sort of a myth.
Okay, interesting.
And the reason being is that if you're in business-to-business sales,
mm-hmm.
It's very, very rare that the customer actually makes the decision in front of you, right? And
right.
Increasingly, as decisions are more consensus-oriented, and you've got groups of people, whether it's 5 or 6 or 8.2, as the CEB people talk about, who are in the decision, you're not closing anybody; they're making that decision.
Right. In a room with a closed door, and you're not invited.
You're not invited. And so this idea that you're closing anybody, it's really archaic and doesn't really exist. So unless you're, selling perhaps insurance door to door and somebody actually
mm-hmm.
signs a contract, or you're selling a car, but outside that in complex sales, it doesn't really happen much anymore. So
what would you recommend? What would you recommend to do, given that you're not going to be there to be, winning people over with your powerful personality? How do you empower the decision maker?
You've done that already, right? So
right.
When people make decisions, and when businesses make decisions, actually individuals do this as well. You really need to look at it in sort of two parts. And the first part of the decision is somebody has to make the decision: are we going to do this or not? It's a binary decision. Are we going to make this change or not? And then the second part of it is, who are we going to do it with, right? So there's the decision, and then they have to make a choice who they're going to do it with. And so, from that standpoint is you really need to focus your sales process as well as supporting the customer's buying process to get them to that point where they're making that binary decision. And if you win that sale, then your odds are pretty good you're going to win the order. And so I call that winning the sale before you win the order. And so the focus is, well, how do I front load as much of the value and as much of the valuable buying experience or value-based buying experience for the customer in that part of the selling process? So it's really saying, look, every time I interact with the prospect, I have to bring my A game. I have to be delivering something of value in exchange for the time that they're giving me to sell to them. And you can start with, if they called you, let's say they initiated the lead or they sent you a web lead, how quickly do you get back to them? Who's talking to them when you get back to them? Do you have a junior person talking to them, or do you have a more experienced person who can answer their questions more responsibly right on the spot and help compress some of those early parts of the buying process? So, in discovery, are you asking the insightful questions that sort of challenge the customer to think more deeply about what it is they need to buy, what they think is the right solution, and really digging a little more deeper into what their requirements are and where they're going to get the payback on the solution that you're trying to sell. So with the end goal that when they're making that point where they're making the binary decision, is that vision in their mind of the outcome they're going to receive from having investing in a solution is your solution.
Fantastic. And so tell me about, what do you do if in this process of that you've outlined here, what do you do if your prospect goes dark on you? What do you think the best strategy is to follow up when someone that you really felt was a qualified prospect and things were going well, when they go dark? What is your play?
Right. So again, when you think about how people make decisions and they process information, is the research that I've read in multiple places is that people have sort of gather information in a serial fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's say they have 6 steps in the decision process or information gathering process, is that, at least the research I've read, is that, they do that in order and they don't skip a step along the way. And so to my mind, if somebody goes dark, really what that's telling me is there's a question that needs to be answered, right? Mm-hmm. That they're waiting for me to provide some information to help them move the next step further in their buying process. And they're sort of waiting for me to provide that. So I needed to go discover exactly what that is. That's not 100% the case of why it is. Sometimes customers made that binary decision that, hey, we're just not going to move forward.
Yeah.
And not every customer feels compelled to tell you that.
We've all been there.
Yeah, it's not their job in life. I mean, if they want to be polite, they could do it, but it's not their job in life to do that. So oftentimes the first thing you want to think about is, okay, well, they're waiting for me to give them some information, right? I keep trying to move them ahead, call them, move ahead to the next step, but they're not ready. They can't do that. They can't move ahead until I give them some information, answer some questions. And if that's not the case, then yeah, maybe they're just made that decision. Yeah, we're just not going to make a change right now.
Yeah. Well, so I wanted to talk about a couple of your two books that are obviously highly influential in the world of sales. I wanted to talk about how what the main takeaways are for a field salesperson and how kind of they mapped that. So let's first talk about Amp Up Your Sales, powerful strategies that move customers to make fast, favorable decisions. And how do you apply what you talked about there to field salespeople?
Well, that book really starts from the premise. They both do to a certain degree, but more explicitly in Amp Up Your Sales, it starts with this idea that there's this bargain, I mentioned before, between buyer and seller. And that bargain is, I as a buyer, I'm going to give you some of my time. You're going to give me something of value in return. Mm-hmm. And everything flows from that. So that every interaction you have with the buyer, no matter how big or how small, has to be value providing. If it's not, why are they going to invest any time with you? And so you think about field sales, or typical behavior is, the customer, I haven't heard from the customer in a while. Hey, I'm going to give the check-in call, right? Hey, this is Andy. Don't have anything new to share. I just want to check in and see what's new. And what happens in that case? You took some of the customer's time and you gave them nothing of value in return. And if you do that repeatedly, they're just going to stop giving you time altogether.
Right.
So Amp Up Your Sales really takes you through this process of saying, okay, well, how do you plan your calls? How do you plan what you do on a daily basis to ensure that you are delivering the optimal amount of value to the prospect at each step of the way?
Got it. And how does a field rep in particular, do you think, how can they ensure that they're moving their deal cycle through and creating value at each step? You mentioned a way to avoid not creating value, which is just calling up and saying, hey, just wanted to check in, no value created. What are some things that you think they could do to make sure they're creating value?
Right. So a simple question they can ask themselves, and I would urge frontline managers, to just go through a pipeline and ask this question of all the deals that are there. So the question is, so what value does the customer need from us right now to move one step closer to making a decision? Mm-hmm. And you should be able to ask that about every deal in the pipeline and get an answer. So if the rep doesn't know what the next step is in terms of what the prospect needs from you in order to move one step closer to making a decision, then they're not engaged in the account. They're not talking to the prospect.
Interesting.
It's just that, and there's a second part to the question and having received that value from us, what are they going to commit to do?
Oh, the old give to get, huh?
Yeah. And so as a sales rep, you need to know the answer to that question about every deal you're working on. Otherwise, what is the plan for that deal? And so in the book, I call that a simple value plan. You just need a value plan for every opportunity you're working. And if you're, deliberate about that, then you're going to be much better off, and you're going to always have this, awareness of really where you are in the context of the deal, where the buyer is in the context of the deal in terms of making their decision, and that's where you want to be. Otherwise, you're in the dark. And unfortunately, too many reps, don't have that plan in mind. They don't think about their deals. One of the things I talk about in Amp Up Your Sales is that we have this tendency, because we have these tools like CRM systems and so on, to sort of enter our data and then forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
And the only time we think about it again is when we're looking at our pipeline, we'll look back in the customer record and say, oh yeah, that's where we left off the last time. No, if you're an observant rep, if you're an engaged rep, an engaged professional, at least for your top prospects, you are thinking about it constantly. It's there's no off button for you. At one level or another, even if you're home at night, you're still thinking, what do they need from me? How could I help them get to the next step? What do they expect from me, or what, maybe they're not thinking about something, and I need to be able to help challenge some of their thinking and get them pointed in one direction or another. But you always have to be ruminating about your deals.
Yeah.
And if you do that, and this is not stressing out about it, it's just, you're just at one level, you're just thinking about it. You're keeping the details present in your mind. If you do that, then you're much more aware and you're engaged. And so this on-off button that we see too many reps have now, unfortunately, due to the technology, it doesn't help them.
Interesting. Yeah, this really resonates with me, because what you're saying here, because I when I was a rep, it was pre CRM days, basically. Well, I guess we had Siebel, but it was kind of before people were really using it the way they do today, using CRMs the way they do today. And I had a spreadsheet that I would keep track of all my deals in. It had a due date, and then it had my next step, and it had the customer's next step.
Mm-hmm.
And I could go through all my deals and say, well, what should I be doing next? And what did they do what they were supposed to be doing next? And I could call. So I always had a thing top of mind to talk to every customer about, and a date that went along with it. So I should be calling them on Thursday, the 21st, and asking, hey, I did this thing for you. I got this. I sent it over to you 4 days ago. Did you get that? Great. And did you do this? The thing that we agreed upon at our last interaction. Yep. And it was a simple CRM. It was just a spreadsheet. I get it wasn't really a CRM, but that's how I tracked my deals.
Yeah. Me too. I mean, spreadsheets, and even before there were spreadsheets. But I don't know what the term is, people use it, but you just have to be awake. Mm-hmm. You have to be aware. You have to be engaged. You have to be curious, and that just requires a certain level of deliberation in what you do. Mm-hmm. And that's the part that's hard. Is so we make sales more process driven, at least in some more transactional B2B sales, and some in the SaaS business as well. Is we sort of take away the perception that reps need to do that. And nothing could be further from the truth. If you want to know what makes the successful people really successful in sales, is they're always thinking about their customer. And again, it's not necessarily top of mind, but they're always thinking about it. And I know from personal experience that's the case, and I know from talking to thousands of salespeople that's the case as well. That's what separates the really good performers from the average performers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about Zero Time Selling, your book, the 10 essential steps to accelerate every company's sales. What would you say that we haven't already covered? What would you say that's in there that we haven't covered that's really you can map to field salespeople and how they could do their jobs better?
Yeah, and Zero Time Selling was really written for field sales in mind. Inside sales was still, it was around, but it wasn't as big a thing when I wrote it.
Mm-hmm. 6 years ago. Yeah.
But I like to think I was actually one of the first sales authors that very deliberately wrote this phrase, which is, success in sales today is less about what you sell and more about how you sell.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'd seen that trend occurring. And even back before I'd started my own company, when I was selling, large complex communication systems, because what I found is we're selling, I spent about 15 years selling, let's say, large, complex, multi-million-dollar communication systems to major corporations around the globe. But I was working for startups, and I was analyzing a lot. It was, well, how did we win these deals, right? Competing against multi-billion-dollar corporations with, 100-year track records, and then, my 5-year-old company, how are we winning these large deals?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it came down to. It wasn't what we were selling, it was how we sold. That was really the differentiator.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the book, I lay out 10 ways that I talk about that companies can use to differentiate the buyer experience, the buying experience, which is increasingly is a critical element of the decision-making process. I mean, if we live in a world where the barriers to entry into markets are pretty low, given the technology that we're using. Every market space has a lot of competitors in it. In the mind's eye of the buyers, we all look alike.
Right.
So if we all look alike, how are we differentiating ourselves? That's by how we sell. Is the first level of differentiation. You as a salesperson, us as sales professionals, we are the front line of differentiation. And so that's really what that book is about, is what are the things you can do to differentiate yourself. And most importantly and this is, I think, is a key lesson for sales professionals, is that those things are all things that are under your direct control. You don't need a boss's approval. One you brought before is responsiveness. That's sort of one key thing that I'm sort of known for. But in my definition, responsiveness doesn't mean fast. Responsiveness means you're fast with the information or the value the prospect needs to move further ahead in their process.
Right. It's the combination.
I talk about the book. I said, fast is good for sprints in the Olympics, but it doesn't win you still.
Well, we've at our company, we've implemented some of your strategies, and which is why one of the reasons I was so excited about this call. But that was one of them. Is we have a whole strategy around getting the right information out to a customer immediately after a call. So after every single call, I want reps to be thinking to take and stop and think for a second. What did we just talk about there? And what is really the key piece of information, or the key case study, or the key question I need to go get the answer for, or a great video displaying that demos some feature that really they seemed interested in, that I can write up and send them in a nice email and get it out in within 10 minutes of that call. And that's that's a key thing that we learned from you that we've put into play here is that responsiveness.
And it makes a difference. So
yeah, we've definitely seen that.
Right. I mean, no buyer sets out to spend more time than is necessary to make a decision to buy something. And really, if you want to summarize and amp up your sales, I summarize this as that, what a buyer wants to do is a buyer wants to quickly gather information to make a good decision with the least investment of time and effort possible. And that sums up what buyers want to achieve. And so if you can help them do that more quickly, and this is sort of the critical part that I think a lot of salespeople and sellers, executives as well, sort of stumble on, is they think that buyers want to make the best decision. And they don't. They want to make the good decision.
And the least risky decision.
And if they can mitigate risk, right. But part of the way they perceive what risk is, well, look, my experience dealing with Badger mapping has been, wow, they're hugely responsive. They're getting me the information I need. They're helping me move through this process more quickly. Now we're looking at your competitor and I'm still waiting for information. What's it going to be like working with them after we give them our business, right? So they're forming these perceptions of you as a seller, as an organization, based on how you sell to them. And so, suddenly it becomes more risky to deal with the company that's not as responsive, at least their perception, right? And science is very clear about this, that perceptions are really sticky. And so once a buyer has formed a perception of you and your ability to deliver and to support them, it is exceedingly difficult to change that perception, even This is the interesting part about the science about perception, is that even when people are given evidence contradict their perception,
Yeah.
it still doesn't change their mind.
Yeah. Humans. You got to know them to sell to them.
Well, it helps, right? The more you can learn about that is how people make decisions, how they gather information, how they process information, because it's all very relevant to what we're doing in sales. But I think it all, sort of the theme about this whole thing is it's, the buyer's experience working with you during their buying process that is perhaps the most decisive aspect of their decision.
Yeah.
And if it's not good, if you can't, when they make that go, no-go decision. And so another report just came out a couple weeks ago saying that in B2B sales, 50% of qualified opportunities in a pipeline never make a decision. Well, that's not true. 100% make a decision. These 50% made the decision to do nothing.
Right. And that's for sure our biggest competitor is people just saying, oh, this is not one of our top 3 things that we're getting done right now. It's number 5, and we're only getting to number 3 in the next 6 months. Let's talk in 6 months.
And the fact is, it's only number 5 because you couldn't make a compelling case that it needs to be number 1.
Absolutely. From an ROI perspective, from a pain perspective, from a
exactly.
What does it cost you to not do this perspective?
Exactly. So as sellers, the reason we get no decisions is because we're not making a compelling business case with whatever metrics we need to provide. We're not providing the vision of how great life is going to be when they're using our solution versus not using a solution. Whatever that compelling business case is, that's why there's no decision made. It's because we didn't make the case. We didn't create the vision. We didn't communicate accurately the ROI, the total cost of ownership, whatever it is. So that we need to keep in mind. And if we can, again, be much more focused on the beginning parts of the selling process to get us to the point where we can communicate that vision, then we'll start minimizing those no decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so that, I guess the first half of being responsive for you, it's obvious how to do that better, in terms of get responsive, be fast, get back to them in a timely fashion. But the second part is, I think the hard part is knowing what should I be getting back to them with? What is the thing that they need to know next, and getting that in front of them. What would you say your biggest secrets are that a field salesperson could take away to becoming more responsive?
Well, I think it's understanding the customer better, right? So when you're doing your discovery, is really asking the penetrating questions that really get to the heart of the matter in terms of what they're trying to achieve. And so I'm sort of a contrarian, is I don't think in my life I've ever sold to a pain point, because I don't think companies make investment decisions to solve a pain. I think they make investment decisions to achieve an objective. And so what I want to do and I've always tried to do, is when I go in and start talking with the customer about what their needs and the requirements are, is I want to understand where they want to be, right? Where do you want to be in 18 months or 2 years? And how does that compare to where you are today? And so now we've identified the gap. How can I help you cross that gap? And understanding that really then becomes important. And so when we have a situation where they have a question and I need to be responsive to it, I have a much better context in terms of what the information is I should be supplying them to help them get to the point where they can make a decision to invest to achieve their objective. And so it's really being aware of your customers, doing the right discovery. It's being connected with your customers at a human level in a way that many people are too scripted these days and they don't form that connection. Well, then someone won't confide in you. They won't respond to a question. You won't earn that right to ask that in-depth question that's going to unveil that next layer of information the prospect really needs. So the multiple parts to it, right? But one is really starts with connecting and then asking the right questions, being completely aware of what they're trying to achieve, and also aware of what you're selling, right? One of the problems we see all the time is reps just aren't aware enough of the value the prospects are getting, or the buyers after they bought the system are getting out of the system they sell. And one of the stories I always tell is doing a win analysis on a customer that bought this large system from us, and they had a compliance matrix that ran about 18 pages, with about 300 items on it.
I love it. I love this.
And the fact is, the CEO bought because of one of those things. And the thing is, you had to know which one. And so that's always what I focused on with my team, and said, well, look, yeah, we're selling these big complex systems, but there's one thing here that's really driving the decision. And we need to find out what that is and who it's most important to.
Yeah.
And once we did that, then we controlled the deal. And that really became something that we really specialized in, is uncovering the true need and the person that's really the person most affected by it. And because they then become your sponsor to help the deal get done.
Yeah. And I mean, I couldn't agree with this anymore. I mean, I'm always telling my reps, focus on communicating what the business, like mapping our solution to business value for them. Like, if you get this, your team will do 20% less of this or 30% more of this, and kind of figuring out with them and getting their best guess, right? Like showing them, here's what we do. What will that do for your company? How, if you had efficient routing for your sales team, how much less would they be driving every day? How many more meetings would they get? And what's that worth to get that many more meetings?
Exactly.
If you can get a number out of them, it makes the buying decision very, very easy. You get them over the hump of, we have to do this because we have 100 guys in the field and each one of them is going to get 2 more meetings every day. What is that worth? Well, it's worth this much. Like once they say that number, the deal's done as far as I'm concerned, because they can't walk away from that.
Yeah. Well, and that's the point I was making earlier is, customers rarely declare victory by putting a Band-Aid on a pain point. But
Right.
they declare victory when they say, yeah, here's a path to achieving our objective. And so that is a hugely different perspective. And that if reps can have that, look, well, how am I helping you achieve something you really want to achieve? How can I serve you to help you achieve that? That's hugely more impactful on the buyer than, how do I stop the bleeding here?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we talked about some really cool things today. I've taken some notes so just to wrap up the things that we've talked about and the points that you've made. So first of all, we talked about closing and the decision-making processes and the way people process information being so much more complex today than they used to be. And you felt like instead of thinking about closing a sale, you need to ask the right questions along the way that lead the prospect to discover whether or not your solution is the right fit, because you're probably not going to be in the room anyway when that quote unquote close time would be available to you.
Exactly.
You talked about zero time selling, and one point there is that the bargain between the buyer and the seller, which is the time for value, like getting them to getting the buyer the value and showing them how much that's worth, and kind of communicating that throughout the sales process. And then finally, we talked about we talked about giving them value in every interaction so that it's worth that trade, that giving them the trade of giving them your time for the value that you're providing, and coming to a simple value plan with everyone. If you're a rep, think about, what is my value plan with this individual prospect or customer? How am I getting them value? What is the next step to get them value if I'm in a sales cycle with them? And if you're a manager, thinking about, that you should be able to ask your rep, hey, on deal XYZ, what is the next thing they need to make a decision from us? I love that way of thinking about that.
Yeah. What's the value we're going to deliver on the next call? Right.
Excellent. Well, Andy, it's been really great having you on the on this podcast and video today. Is there anything else that you feel like we should talk about? If you have a message,
we could talk forever.
A message to the field salespeople of the world. What does the famous Andy Paul have to tell them?
Stay curious. I mean, I think that curiosity has propelled me in my own career. And I was a history major in college that had no idea about sales, and I spent my entire career before I started my own company 17 years ago, but it was still a long period of time selling, very large, complex technical products. And I was out of my comfort zone at every step of the way. And so how did I adapt is I just had this compelling urge to keep on learning and to be curious about the people I was selling to and people as individuals and the problems they had and the individuals as part of a corporation I was selling to. It's just that, curiosity, read books. I largely driven by the podcast, but so I'm a little bit extreme, but I figured, and I've discovered in the last 18 months, I've read, 150 sales books.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but
that's what I always say that I'm going to do, but I never actually do.
Well, I read the books my guests that come on my show that they've written. I feel I owe them the courtesy of reading their books, and also I'll be prepared to talk to them, and that's I think a hallmark of my show. But but even in the absence of that, I would still be reading a lot of books, and it's I know a devalued thing these days to tell people that you're reading books, but there's still a lot of great books being written. And what I find is I'm just looking for one nugget in every book. If I get one nugget, and I've been selling for 40 years, and I still every day learn something new about sales. Yeah. Well, so it's because I'm just curious, because I know there's more to be learned and more to become involved in becoming a better version of myself, that I can serve my customers better, my clients better. So be curious and read, listen to podcasts, listen to webinars, go to conferences, talk to your peers, what they're doing, go to meetups. There's all these resources available these days that can help you keep learning.
What a fantastic message. And we've definitely learned a lot at Badger from the things that you've said and things that you've written. So I really appreciate what you've done for us. Andy, what is, if people wanted to reach out to you or wanted to hear more about what the types of things that you talk about, or the types of things that you say, where would they go to learn more?
So there's several avenues. One is they can listen to my podcast as well, which you've been a guest on in the past. It's called Accelerate with Andy Paul, and you find that on iTunes. We currently are releasing 3 new episodes a week.
Wow.
Yeah, well, we're probably going to scale that back a little bit, but there's a lot of interesting people out there to speak with. If they want to contact me, I'm very old-fashioned. You can follow me on social media. Find me Twitter at @RealAndyPaul, but pick up the phone, call me. You can call me at 619-980-4002 or send me an email at andy@zerotimeselling.com.
Well, thanks a lot, Andy. This has been absolutely fantastic, and I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Hey, Steve, thanks for having me. Great to talk with you as always, a fellow Badger.
Always. Well, thanks for coming, Andy.
Talk soon.
All right. Bye-bye.